Hey guys, and welcome back to a new Jetpack Compose tutorial. In this video, I will show you how you can implement date and time picker dialogues in Jetpack Compose. You probably know these material dialogues from XML, but in Compose, it's not natively supported yet. I'm assuming Google will come up with a solution in future to have material dialogues as well. But right now we have to rely on a cool library. It basically comes with all the functionality we need, and I will show you how you can use that to implement such a dialog here in Jetpack Compose. And you can of course also style this as you like. This is quite an ugly default design. You will learn how you can also implement some kind of date validation logic. So you can see I can only select even dates and not the odd ones. And after we selected a date, let's say November 16th, we click OK, then it will actually apply that and print it here. And the same I will show you for a time dialog. So here we can select a time between noon and 8 p.m. here. So let's pick a time, and then you can see it also shows that here. So as I said, we will use a library for that, and that's really not a problem. Usually you should not implement something like that on your own unless you really rely on that custom design of your date picker dialogues. But you can save so much time by just making use of a library like this one here. So props to the authors of that library. It's quite cool and quite easy to use. And I also added this core library desugaring, which is only needed if you target or if your minimum SDK is lower than 26. Because then you need to add this line to also be able to use the local date time API of Java. And you also need to set core library desugaring enabled to true in your compile options. If you have that, we can jump into main activity and actually start building our simple UI with our two dialogues. First of all, we want to declare some states. These states will on the one hand reflect the currently selected date and time. And on the other hand, we want to have states that just format that time a little bit to display in our UI. So we start by declaring a var picked date by remember. And we just set that to some kind of default date, mutable state of local date, not local data, local date dot now, for example. So just the current date. We import get value and mutable state of, import again. And then we can do the same for picking a time. So var picked time by remember mutable state of. And here we choose some kind of default time. You can also choose any time basically, for example, noon here. And then we want to have two other states which just get recalculated or recreated every time one of these states actually changes. So whenever the pick date state changes, so whenever we pick a date, we want to just recalculate the formatting of that picked date. So what we can do is we can say val formatted date by remember. And in here we say derived state of, because that state is derived of another state, which is our pick date state. So we say pick date, actually, let's do date time formatter first, dot of pattern. And the pattern we want to format here is, let's say we have 3 letters for the month, then 2 letters for the day, and 4 letters for the year. And then we can say that format, and we want to format our picked date. We can then copy this and paste it for our time, so formatted time. And in here we just change the format, which will be hours and minutes. And we also swap this out with picked time. Cool, so now we have all of our states, but we of course need to assign them after we picked a time and a date. So how do we do that? We first of all want to go down and create a column with our buttons, which will then trigger our material dialogues. So we say modifier fill max size, like this. And let's also make sure to add some horizontal alignment of center horizontally and vertical alignment arrangement of center as well, just to center these buttons and texts. And we can then add a button. When we click it, we want to open our date dialog, and the text will be pick date. We then add a text below that, which will show our formatted date. So we can say formatted date here. We can then add a little bit of spacing for our time dialog, 16 dp, import dp, alt enter, copy this stuff, paste it below, and rename this to pick time, and this one here to formatted time. Cool. So when we click these buttons, what should happen? Well, then we of course want to show our dialogs. And the way this works with this library we added is with so-called material dialog states. So we can say we on the one hand have a date dialog state, which is equal to remember material dialog state. And we have the same for our time dialog state. Remember material dialog state. And these states can now be used to simply show that dialog. So when we click this button here to pick a date, we say date dialog state .show. And the same will happen when we click the other button, then we say time dialog state .show. Cool. But now we haven't specified anything about the dialogs. So right now nothing would really show because we haven't specified the composables for our actual dialogs. How do we do that? We do that below our column that does not need to be inside any other composable. Right here, we can say we have a material dialog, and here we now need to set up quite a bit of stuff. Most importantly, the dialog state. So we link our state to this composable so that the library knows when we call show on our state that we also show this dialog. So we pass our date dialog state here. We can then, we could configure some dialog properties. For example, if we want to dismiss this dialog on backpress, which is true by default, usually what you want, you can dismiss on click outside. So if you click somewhere outside the dialog, should it hide the dialog? Usually also what you want, and some kind of secure policy. I'm not sure what that is, but we can simply leave this away here. And then you can also style this here as you want. So you could assign a background color, you could assign another shape if you want that, even a border. So there are some customization options here. You can add some elevation, auto dismiss, which is true by default. So if you click on one of its buttons, it will always dismiss the dialog, usually also what you want. On close request might be interesting. So this will be called when the dialog is requested to be closed. So when the user clicks outside, when the user clicks cancel. So in any of these scenarios, this would simply fire. So if you want to do something in that case, use this lambda. And what else? Buttons. That's important because we want to add some buttons to our dialog. Let's leave that. And these buttons we can actually create here. So usually we have some kind of positive and a negative button for our dialogs. So we can say positive button, which would be something like okay or yes. And we can add some text, which would simply be okay. So we pick the date. After that, we can specify some, an on-click listener. When we click that, it will already automatically dismiss the dialog, so you don't need to do that in the on-click listener. That's only needed if you want to do some extra thing, for example, showing a toaster. So let's do that here. Toast make text. Use our application context and say clicked OK or so. Toast length long, .show. And then below that, we can also add a negative button for which the text would simply be cancel, for example. You also have the option to add another button, which would be the neutral button. So if you want to have a third one, maybe something like remind me later or so, or you have the option for an accessibility button, which consists of an icon. Yeah, then you just have an additional icon button. So quite cool what the library offers here. We only need these two positive and negative buttons. And then inside of this block, we can now define the type of dialog we actually have. Because right now we just specified that we have a material dialog, and this library offers a lot of material dialogs, not only date and time. In here, we can then say, if we take a look here, we have a lot. So we could put a custom view in that dialog. That just allows us to easily define custom dialogs, but that already works with Compose out of the box quite easily. We can have a list of items, multiple choice list, multiple items with a single choice, just a title, or we have date and time picker. That is what we're interested in here. So we make that a date picker. And in here, we can set the initial date of our date picker. So what the initially selected date will be. Let's just say local date at now. The title, we could choose pick a date, for example. What else? You could choose the colors, which is like date picker colors. Or date picker defaults, it is .colors. And in here, you could specify a bunch of colors for all the different UI components of that dialog. I won't change that here, just that you know how you could change it. And what's cool is this allow date validator, what I showed you. So in here, you actually get a local date and you need to return a Boolean whether you want that date to be selectable or not. That is what I showed you. So if, for example, the day of month is modulo 2 is 0, then you could only select even dates. If that's 1, you could only select odd dates. And yeah, so if you have a certain logic behind that, when a date should be selectable, for example, if you don't want weekends, you could also specify that here, so then weekends would not be selectable. Yeah, let's just leave that logic here, just you see that it works. And one thing that's missing now is when a user selected a date, how do we get the date they selected? Because we of course want to update our pick date state here. And we get that here in the date picker in a block right afterwards. Here we get it, so a local date, and then we can say pick date is equal to it. And that's it for our date picker dialog. We can now copy this because the time picker dialog is very similar. Paste it below, swap that out with time dialog state, and the buttons can stay the same. And just here, we want to make sure that we have a time picker. Of course, we don't have an initial date now. We also don't have an initial time, I think. Do we have? Yeah, we do have an initial time. So we could say local time dot noon, for example. We can say pick a time. We don't have a date validator, of course, but we have something similar, which is called time range. And here we can pass a time range that is selectable, for example, from local time dot midnight till local time dot noon. So then only the hours 0 to 12 will be selectable because that's our range. And here we then get our reference to the local time that we selected. So here we can update pick time to it. And that should be everything we need to do to implement these two dialogues for our UI. If we launch this on my device, take a look here and wait until the app is opened, then we hopefully see that we can select some dates and times here. There we go. We have our UI here. So if we click pick date, then our date picker dialog will show. You can see now we can only select odd dates, as I said. And yeah, let's pick this one, click OK. There we go, we get the message, clicked OK, and the date was properly adjusted here. And we can also select a time. We can select AM, PM. You can also change this if you want the 24-hour format. And what is selectable here? I'm not sure why nothing is selectable. Okay, because I need to select AM. Yeah, I'm not used to this this way of specifying time in Europe. So let's pick 8 AM, for example. And there we go. Here's our 8 AM. We clicked OK again. So I hope you enjoyed this video and this helped you to actually implement your date and time pickers in Jetpack Compose. If so, then you will definitely also love my more advanced Android courses, which you can find down in this video's description, where I can just go much more into detail into building whole projects about important topics you need in the industry. So definitely do check these out. You will love them. Apart from that, thanks for watching this video. I wish you an amazing rest of the week and I'll see you back in the next one. Bye bye.